What's up, Bobcats? Today we're going to make a homemade pizza. And I'm going to start by showing you how to make a crust. Now, you can make pizza at home. You can do it 1,000 different ways. You can buy pre-made dough from numerous supermarkets, let that rise up and make it out of fresh raw dough. You can buy those sort of biscuit style doughs in the canisters, and you can roll those out and use them. You can buy the pre-made already cooked doughs that come in the plastic package, and then you just dress that up with sauce and cheese and put it all in the oven. And those all make great pizzas. There's nothing wrong with doing any of that. At school we make a New York style pizza, which is from a raw dough, a very soft dough. We stretch it out, we put it on the grates, and we sauce and cheese, and we put it in the oven. We do it that way. This pizza I'm going to show you is actually going to use our focaccia recipe. So what I'm going to do is make 2 large focaccias, and instead of just eating them as focaccia, we're going to turn them into pizza. This is something I think is simple enough to do at home. I'm going to show you how I do it at home. So unlike at school where we're going to use the big commercial mixers, here we're going to use our hands. I don't have a mixer at home. I imagine a lot of you don't have a mixer at home. So this is just a way to show you to do it just by hand. Basic ingredients basically in any bread dough are pretty straightforward. Flour, water, and salt. And then to this dough also we're going to add some sugar. All right. The other thing that's important with focaccia is that we sort of let it rise and cook in a lot of olive oil. And you'll see when we get to that point, I am going to use a ton of olive oil. I am using extra virgin olive oil. That's why it's sort of this dark green. If you don't have that, you can use a lighter olive oil. You really could just use vegetable oil. That would be fine. It's just you're not going to have that flavor that the olive oil brings, but it will still give you a nice crispy crust, and that's what we're going to go for. The nice thing about this particular dough also is because it's not going to be a raw dough. We're going to cook our doughs ahead of time and basically make a focaccia. You can make that bread ahead of time, the focaccia ahead of time. You can even wrap it in plastic, put it in the fridge, and then a couple days later make your pizza. So this is a very versatile way to prepare pizza. All right, let's get started. I do have a digital scale, and this recipe is written up all in weights. There are no volume measurements in this recipe. When we're doing bread baking, it really is important that our ratios are right. And when we measure flour in particular by volume, it's very hard to get an accurate measurement. So I'm going to suggest to you, if you are going to attempt this recipe or any bread, that you do get yourself a digital scale. They do have them at some of the big box stores. They start around $12, and they're perfectly acceptable for this sort of procedure. All right, so I'm going to turn my scale on. This recipe is all written up in grams, so I'm going to make sure that it's showing the G on there. I'm going to first start by putting my water bowl on there. I like to measure my water out, dissolve my sugar and yeast, and sort of get that yeast growing. Now, I put the water bowl on there. Obviously, that weighs something. It weighs 312 grams. I'm going to hit the on button or 0 button again, and that's going to bring it down to 0 grams, and now I can add my water to the bowl. I need 585 grams of water, and grams go real quick, so you got to pay attention while you're pouring. I will wipe that up in a second. I've already got almost 400 grams of water in there. 500, 550, 70, 80, 585 grams of water. Splash, I was a little aggressive there. We'll just wipe that up, no problem. Don't leave the mess, get it cleaned up right away. All right, so I've got my 585 grams of water in here. To this I'm going to add my yeast, and I'm going to add my sugar. Now when we're at school, we use a bulk commercial yeast product that's basically a powder, and we scoop it right out. At home, you're probably not going to have that. You won't be able to buy it in the regular store, and you don't need to buy yeast by the pound. You can buy it in just little packets like this. Now, most stores you're going to find it 2 different ways. The regular active dry yeast, and then the one that says rapid rise on it. It's an instant dry yeast. The rapid rise one will work faster. You can use the same amount. It works just the same, only it'll work faster and it works better with cold water. In this particular instance, I'm going to use the regular active dry yeast. It'll take a little bit more time. I could use the rapid rise yeast, but I don't have as much of it, so I am just going to use this one. I am using regular tepid or room temperature water. If you wanted to speed the process up a bit, you could warm the water up to around 100 degrees, no more than 110 degrees, but you're sort of playing with fire there. If you make the water too hot, you're going to kill the yeast and nothing's going to happen. Rest assured that if your water is tepid, room temperature, the reaction will take place. It just might take some time. So I'm actually going to add 2 of these packs of yeast to my water. I'm just going to cut them open with a scissor and pour them right in. Alright, now also to my water I want to add my sugar. A little bit of sugar in the water is going to give the yeast something to feed on, and it'll sort of start to get it to grow. Get this stuff out of the way. Another little wipe here. Alright, so sugar I'm going to put another little bowl on the scale, zero my scale, and I need 20 grams of sugar. Oops, and that's salt, so I'm not going to put that in there. If you add salt to the water, you will also kill the yeast. We're going to do 20 grams of sugar, 13 grams, 15, 17, 20, exactly. Pour that right into our water. Now we'll take our whisk and whisk it up till that sugar and yeast sort of dissolve in the water. You only need to whisk it for about 20 seconds. Just make sure all that yeast is mixed in well, all that sugar is mixed in well, and then we can put this to the side while we measure out our flour. And you'll notice by the time we get back to it, it'll probably have some little bubbles formed on top. All right, I'm going to zero my scale again. Actually, put the bowl on. Zero my scale, and I'm going to add 900 grams of flour to the bowl. This is bread flour. This is not all-purpose flour. Bread flour is higher gluten. Now you could use all-purpose flour, but you're going to want to use less water. So I don't have a recipe written for that. I only have a recipe written for bread flour. Bread flour really is a better flour to be using for this particular kind of dough. It's going to keep it a little bit chewier. It's going to let it get a little bit crispier. So I'm going to measure out my 900 grams of flour here. And we're up to about 645. It took us to 790. So right at the end there, we want to go nice and carefully and 850, 877, 890. And there we go, 900 grams of flour. I can move my flour bowl to the side. To the flour, we want to add our salt. And actually, if you go ahead and zero your scale again, you can weigh your salt directly into your flour. And salt, I only need 14 grams of salt. I am using kosher salt. 7, 9, that's 11. There we go, 14 grams of salt. Put that to the side. Now I just want to whisk this together and really combine that salt into the flour. I can turn my scale off and get that out of the way. Now we want a nice, clean, sanitized, and dry counter to work on. If you have a large plastic baking sheet, that would help for you to turn the dough out onto. We're going to start mixing the dough right in the bowl, adding water to it, but at some point we are going to have to turn this out onto the countertop, and I am going to just get myself a rubber spatula to help out also. So what you want to do is take your bowl of flour and sort of push the flour up to the sides to make a well in the middle of the bowl that you can start adding your water to. Now when we do this at school, it's way easier, no doubt. We use the mixer, we put the water and our yeast in the main mixing bowl, we add all the flour, we put the dough hook on, and we just turn it on and let it run. When you're using your hands, you got to take a little bit more time with it to try to basically keep it from getting way too messy on you. So I'm just going to pour some of that raw water right into that well that I made, probably only about half of the water, and then just start incorporating the flour from the outside into that water. I'm starting with the rubber spatula, but eventually I'm going to have no choice but to use my hands. There we go. I've got about half that water and half the flour combined. Go ahead and add another bit of the water. And keep working that flour into the water. All right, I'm ready to get my hands into this bowl now. I'm just going to keep turning the dough over, working the last of that flour in the bottom of the bowl into the dough before I turn it out onto the countertop. There we go. You work it in the bowl for a bit, but eventually you're going to need the space that the countertop's going to offer you. Now I know a lot of times, see now my dough's come together, it's very shaggy, it's kind of sticky. All right. Now a lot of times, I know you guys watch people baking on TV and you see them take a handful of flour and throw it all over the countertop. We're not going to do that. We do not want to add extra flour to this dough. The amount of flour and water ratio that we have in this dough is what we want, and we don't want to change that. So I'm going to turn this dough right out onto the counter, and I'm going to start kneading it till it really smooths out. And this is going to take maybe 10 minutes of kneading, and what I'm doing is pulling it over itself and then pushing with the heel of my hand. All right, I've been kneading this dough now for probably about 7 minutes, and you can see it's starting to smooth out. You notice it's not a big shaggy mess anymore. It's really smoothing out. I got to work it for a few more minutes, and I'm just pushing the heel of my hand into the dough and pulling it back, and then pushing my heel into it again and pulling it back. And I'm just repeating that. And you can use both hands, and we're just working it till it gets nice and smooth. All right, that's pretty good. So we have a nice smooth dough ball, and we're ready to basically put this into our pans. Now what we want to do first, I'm going to turn my scale on to 0, and we want to weigh our dough ball. This is going to give us an idea of how we can split it nice and evenly. And this dough ball weighs almost 1,500 grams. So we're going to try to cut it in half, and we're going to try to make both of those balls of dough 750 grams. Let's see what we got. 789, so this one will probably be a little bit smaller. 706, we can pull a little bit off one, put it on the other. 727. There we go. 748. These two are going to be close enough. 748 and 745. That's perfect. All right. Now here's the real key to making our focaccia. You're going to just sort of flatten your dough balls out a little bit, not too much, because they're very, very, very stretchy right now because those glutens are all really tight. And we're going to take olive oil and you're going to absolutely coat the bottom of your baking pan. Guys, I'm not joking. You need a good amount of olive oil. I'm probably using, I don't know, a quarter cup of olive oil to coat the bottom of this pan. And you see it really is a fairly thick coating everywhere on the pan. I'm going to take my dough and lie it in that olive oil and flip it and absolutely coat the dough in olive oil. Now I'm going to let this sit and rest and rise. I am going to cover it in plastic wrap. It's probably going to take I don't know, maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours. It all depends on the temperature. All right, we'll put that aside. I'll do the other one. And then I am going to cover them both up in plastic wrap, and we'll let them sit. And when we come back, we'll flip them and we'll get them ready for the oven.